So what is meristematic tissue? It is nothing but the region where actively dividing cells are being present. So therefore this meristematic tissue is again divided into primary tissue and secondary tissue. The first formed meristems are present in the tip of the root. It is present in the axils of the stem or the tip of the stem. The older cells will no more divide. They will become completely mature and they will stop their division. So such cells together constitutes the permanent tissue. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on a new chapter, that is chapter 6, Anatomy of Flowering Plants. I am Dr. Divya, Biology Faculty, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysore, Temple of Excellence. So in today's session, we shall study about what are the cells and the different type of cells that are present inside the plant. So in the previous session, when learning about the morphology of flowering plants, I had told you that there is a difference in the structure when it comes to the root. So all the roots have a main function of production of food or absorbing food from the soil. But apart from that, there are certain roots which also provide support to the plants, such as the prop roots or the adventitious roots that are seen in the banyan tree. So in general, when we morphologically just look at a root, all the roots look similar, right? But it is when we take a cross section or a transverse section of the root and observe the inner cells that are present in it under the microscope, then only we come to know that there is difference in the arrangement of the cells. Why is this? Again, it is depending on the species of the plants, and the vast majority of difference comes when the plant belongs to a monocot and a dicot. So, what are the anatomical differences that are seen in a monocotyledon stem, root and leaf, as well as in a dicotyledon stem, root and leaf, we shall see in this particular chapter. So, we shall start with this session. So first, before moving on to studying about the cells, we need to know what tissues are. So we shall start with the tissues. So tissues are a group of cells. So one single cell is one cell. These cells, they multiply and they form a group of cells to form a tissue. So what is a tissue? A tissue is a group of cells which performs a common function. Say for example, it is easy to understand when I take an example of a human being. So human being, say for example, the stomach. So stomach, it is made up of numerous amount of cells. So therefore, it is a tissue. Those tissues together, which performs a similar function, forms the organ. So what is the function of that particular organ? So whatever cells may be present in the stomach, what are the functions? It is to produce the enzymes that are needed for digestion and to facilitate the digestion process, right? Just like that in plants also, almost all the cells, say for example, I'll take the example of sclerenchyma. So sclerenchyma, it is a fibrous tissue or it is a dead tissue. So that tissue actually provides mechanical support to the plant. So it gives that rigidity or the hardness to that particular plant. So likewise, what are tissues? It is a group of cells which has a common origin and usually they perform a common function. So a plant is actually made up of different kinds of tissues. So what are those tissues? We shall study today. So the first one is the meristematic tissues and the permanent tissues. Again, under the meristematic tissues and the permanent tissues, they are divided into different forms. What is this? So first we shall see with that of the meristematic tissues. So meristematic, it is a word that is derived from the Greek language. So in Greek, meristos means divided. So those cells which are actively dividing are called as the meristematic cells. If you remember, in the previous chapter, I had told you about the root tip, right? So the root elongates at the root tip. Why? Because it is at the root tip the large amount of meristematic cells or the dividing cells are there. So when the cells divide, the size of the root will also increase as well as the length of the root will also increase. So that therefore meristematic tissue is a region of active cell division. So what is meristematic tissue? It is nothing but the region where actively dividing cells are being present. So therefore this meristematic tissue is again divided into primary tissue and secondary tissue. Again in the primary tissue, it is again divided into apical meristems and intercalary meristems. So what are all these? One by one we shall study in this particular session. So the apical meristem is again divided into the root apical meristem, which is also called as RAM, and the shoot apical meristem, which is also called as the SAM. So therefore, it is understood that the apical meristem is present at the tip of the root and the shoot. And next, moving on to the secondary meristem. So the secondary meristem is divided into lateral meristem. So these are the different types of meristematic tissues that are present in a plant when it comes to the root and the stem. Next, we shall study about the apical meristem. So in the apical meristem, where is it actually present? As the name itself suggests, apical means at the tip, at the end. So therefore, the apical meristems are present at the tip of the root and the shoot, and they produce the primary tissue. So in the apical meristem, there is the primary tissue. So these primary tissues are nothing but the root apical meristem and the shoot apical meristem. So there are root apical meristem, where is it present? It is present at the tip of the root, therefore it helps in the elongation of the root. And the shoot apical meristem is present at the extreme tip of the stem axis, that is at the extreme tip of the stem. It will be present wherein it will give rise to the bud development or the flower development, and also it will help in the elongation of the stem. I have here taken the example of the apical meristem of the root, that is the root apical meristem, and the shoot apical meristem. So we shall study about them. So here first we shall study about the root apical meristem. So as I told you, this is the root cap. So therefore the tip of the root is nothing but the root cap. But in the root cap, remember, there is no apical meristem being present. But root cap is the one which actually provides protection to the tip of the root. Why? Because in that particular region, the apical meristems, the meristematic cells are present which will be actively dividing. So therefore, until the life cycle of a plant ends, the root tends to grow. It is a non-stop growing process. So therefore, in the root apical meristem, since numerous young cells are there which are very fragile because they are not mature, they need to be protected. Why? Because imagine this is a root and here at the tip there is the root apical meristem being present. So when the apical meristems are actively dividing, the root will increase in length. So when the root increases its length towards the soil, it will have to push the soil particles and grow beneath, right? So if it has to grow beneath, a tough layer should be covered, or else what happens? Apical meristems, the newly formed cells may get damaged. So in order to prevent that, the root cap will be present. That is at the tip of the root covering the root apical meristem. So therefore we have the root cap. Then next to the root cap, it is the initials of the root cap. So from the initials is nothing but it is something that is starting. So it is the starting point of the root cap. So initials of the root cap will be present, and then the initials of the central cylinder and the cortex will be present. So central cylinder, that is the formation of the pith, and the cortex. So cortex has numerous amount of different types of cells such as parenchyma, sclerenchyma, the collenchyma, the chlorenchyma, all that will be present. But since it is a root, there is no chlorenchyma, but the rest of the cells will be usually present in the cortex. So this you will study in the coming sessions when I teach you about the transverse sections of the dicot and the monocot stem and the root. So there it will be even more clear. So initials of the central cylinder and the cortex, that particular region will be present, then the protoderm will be present and the cortex. So it is the cortex. So cortex, from where it will start again? From this particular region, that is the initial, that is the starting point for the cortex development. From there, the other cells, that is be it the sclerenchyma, the parenchyma or the collenchyma, all these will be formed there. Next, moving on to the central cylinder. So central cylinder, it is nothing but the pith region that will be present, and the central cylinder is the one which has all the vascular bundles being present there. So can you see here, there are different types of cells. So actually these root apical meristems or the meristematic cells, they actually divide and mature to form the root cells, which eventually together it forms the root tissue. So therefore, root apical meristem is very, very important in order, especially in the case of root, for the root to elongate. It is very, very important. So next, moving on to the shoot apical meristem. So since the shoot apical meristem, I told you it is present at the extreme tip. So if this is the shoot, so at this particular extreme tip, the apical meristems will be present exactly at the apical or at the extreme end of the extreme tip of the root. So therefore, it is also called as the axillary bud, because it is from this region exactly the formation of the leaf arises, and also the formation, because just imagine a seed which develops the first leaf. So from here, at the tip, the leaf will form, again it will elongate, the leaf will form. So this is how the shoot apical meristem also give rise to the leaf primordium or the formation of the new leaf. So we shall study it as the axillary bud. So why? Because they usually give rise to formation of the buds, especially the flower buds. So buds present in the axils of the leaves are called as the axillary bud. So what is axil? So this particular part. So bud, whatever bud is present at the axil of the leaf, they are called as the axillary bud, and they are capable of forming a branch of flower. Even at this particular tip, you can see these apical meristems will divide here, and what is the fate of those cells? The fate of those cells is to produce new flowers. So they will start to produce new flowers at the tip, not just at the tip but also at the axils of the leaf, because you know that flower arrangement can also take place at the axils of the leaf. So buds present in the axils of the leaves, and also they are capable of forming a branch or a flower. So it also helps, as I told you, they also help in the forming of branches in the tree, branching of the stem, and also they help in formation of the flower. So that is why it is called as axillary bud. At the tip as well as at the axils, these actively dividing meristematic cells are present. And why is it called as a shoot apical meristem? Because it is present in the shoot, that is why. And it is formed by the cells that are left behind from the shoot apical meristem. So this is about the shoot apical meristem. So next, we can see here the leaf primordium, that is at the axil. There is the leaf primordium. So it is at this region, either the development of a new leaf or the formation of a new bud, all that occurs. Next comes the shoot apical meristematic zone. So as I told you, the small shoot grows, and again here the cells will divide, branching will take place, again the shoot will develop, and here in between there also the apical meristems will be present, which will give rise to the formation of a new flower or a leaf. And also the axillary bud is present. So axillary bud, and this axillary bud, so imagine this to be the leaf or a new branching. In that particular region, a flower development will also take place, and also differentiating vascular tissue. So what are the vascular tissues? It is nothing but the xylem and the phloem, and any plant, it should have, or it will be having, the xylem and the phloem, because they are the ones which help in the conduction or the transport of the food and the water. Therefore, likewise, the root, the vascular tissues or the vascular bundles are very, very important. Just like that in the shoot also it is very, very important. So all the cells throughout the entire body of the plant, these vascular tissues will also be present. So this is about the axillary bud. So next, moving on to the intercalary meristem. So I told you the apical meristems are divided into primary meristems, right? So that primary meristem is again divided into the shoot apical meristem and the root apical meristem and the intercalary meristem. So remember, what are primary meristems? Primary means the first formed, the initial stages. So the first formed meristems are present in the tip of the root, it is present in the axils of the stem or the tip of the stem, and it is also present in the in between, that is in between the mature tissues. Therefore, it is also called as the intercalary meristem, and these three, that is the apical meristem, the root apical meristem, the shoot apical meristem and the intercalary meristem, all the three of these comes under the primary meristem, means they are the first formed cells. It is from these first formed cells, next newly synthesized cells will start to develop. So that is why. So these are the intercalary meristem. Inter means in between something. So where are these meristems being present? They are present in between the mature tissues, right? So that is why it is called as intercalary meristem. So these are the meristems which occur between the mature tissues, and usually they are seen in monocotyledon members such as the grasses, and they regenerate parts removed by the grazing herbivores. So what happens here is, plants, whenever there is a threat, can the plant run away from the place? No, right? So whenever an animal is feeding on the plant, have you seen once the animal bites into a plant, will the plant eventually die off? No, right? It will again regenerate itself. Or say when there is a forest fire, even if there is a forest fire, a little bit of the shoots, green shoots are remaining there, then again the plant will develop again, or the tree will develop again into new branches and new leaves. All that is because of the intercalary meristem. So these intercalary meristems, which will be hiding in between the mature tissues, they will start to divide. Why? Because then meristematic cells will be present. So those meristematic cells will start to divide again, and it will give rise to the new parts of the plant. So that is why it is very, very important. Even when the cows or the grazing animals, they are feeding on the grasses, they always feed on the upper part of the grass. But in spite of that, will the grass vanish from that particular region? No. After one or two rains, again it will grow back, right? Why is it? It is because of the intercalary meristem. So therefore, they occur in grasses and they help in the regeneration of the parts. So whatever parts is lost, those intercalary meristems which are present in between the mature tissues, they will again start to divide and again form new cells. Those new cells will form a tissue, and again the grasses will regenerate. So that is how it will regenerate. So this is the function of the intercalary meristem. So both apical as well as intercalary meristems. What are the apical meristems? That is the SAM, that is the shoot apical meristem, and the RAM, that is the root apical meristem. So both of the apical meristem as well as the intercalary meristem, they form the primary meristem. Why? Because they appear early in the life of the plant. As I told you, they are called as the first formed because they are formed first. From those newly synthesized cells again starts to form. So, and therefore they help in the formation of the primary plant body. So, from a seed, if the seed will develop a plumule and that plumule will generate a shoot, that shoot should grow, then what should be present? The shoot apical meristem. Likewise, the root also, if it has to grow, the root apical meristem should be present. So, it is the one which takes the initial or the first step for the formation of the shoot and the root. Therefore, it is called as the primary meristem. So therefore, these primary meristems are very, very important. Why? Because once the primary meristems are formed, then only the secondary meristems can occur from the primary meristem. We shall move into studying about the secondary meristems. Under secondary meristem, what was it called? It was called as the lateral meristem. That is, lateral means at the sides. So those present at this particular region will be the primary meristems, and after the formation of the primary meristems, those meristems that occurs in the mature region of the root or the shoot is called as a lateral meristem. So here, meristems that occur in the mature regions of the root and the shoot, especially those which produce the woody So why woody? Because remember, usually the stem of herbaceous plants, it is green in color. But see that of the tree first it will develop a green color fragile stem which is having the apical meristems. Later on, as they mature, they will develop a bark and all that. It will completely increase in size. It will become hard because it will have a lot of matured cells, and also it will have a bark covering and all that. It will become brown and woody. Why? Those cells are nothing but the lateral meristem. So lateral meristem actually helps the plant to produce woody region. So it helps the plant. So therefore lateral meristems, they are particularly produced in the woody axis of the trees. Why it is called the secondary meristem? Because it forms from the primary meristem. They are completely matured cells. They are not immature cells or newly formed cells. They are completely matured cells. And they appear later than the primary meristem. As I told you, after the formation of the primary meristem, then the secondary meristem or the lateral meristem gives rise. So that is why it appears later than the primary meristem, and they are also called as the cylindrical meristems. So they are different forms of lateral meristems. So they are fascicular, vascular, cambium. So cambium, again in cambium, it can be the fascicular, vascular cambium, the interfascicular cambium, and the cork cambium. So all these, in the coming sessions, you will be studying about these secondary growth. During the secondary growth, actually these meristems actively participate in the secondary growth of the plant. So when we study the secondary growth of the plant, there we shall see about all these different types of lateral meristems and what their functions are and how they are formed and how do they look like. And these are the examples of the lateral meristem, that is the cambium. So all the cambium regions, or cambium is nothing but the second form cell. So all the cambium regions such as the vascular cambium, the interfascicular cambium and the cork cambium are the best examples for the lateral meristem. So what were the best examples for the apical meristem? It was the shoot apical meristem and the root apical meristem and the intercalary meristem. But when it comes to lateral meristem, these are the examples, and they are very, very important for producing the secondary tissue. So especially in the trees or the woody plants, these cells, that is the cork cambium and the cambium, these cells will be usually present, and they are responsible for producing the secondary tissues or the second formed cells which forms the secondary tissues. So next, moving on to permanent tissues. So after the division of the cells, so once now in the plant there is formation of the primary meristem. So primary cells have been formed. Those primary cells have divided and they have matured and they have formed the secondary meristems. Now after the formation of the primary meristem and the secondary meristem, there are some cells which are again newly formed, and these cells, they become structurally and functionally specialized in such a way that it loses the ability to divide, means it reaches a last stage. So in the first stage, what happened? Meristematic cells were there. That is, in the primary meristem, meristematic cells were there. So those cells kept on dividing. So they are actively dividing. They keep dividing until the life of the plant ends, because you know that unlike animals, the plants do not have a particular growth period, right? It grows continuously until the death of the plant occurs. So that is the peculiar character of a plant. But here what happens? Okay, I told you the meristematic cells, the primary meristems will keep actively dividing. They will produce young cells, and those young cells will enter into a next stage wherein it will form the secondary meristems, right? And those secondary meristems are actively dividing again, and few of the secondary meristems will enter into the permanent tissue. So once again the division takes place, so it is just like how the aging of the plant. So when it reaches a stage wherein the cells no more divide, or the division of the cells will completely stop, such tissues are called as the permanent tissues. So following after the cell division, after the division of the cells, that is after the primary division of the cells and the secondary division of the cells, the plants the few cells in the plants will reach a stage wherein it will stop dividing. That is, I'm talking about the older cells. So the older cells will no more divide. They will become completely mature and they will stop their division. So such cells together constitutes the permanent tissue. So such cells are termed as permanent or mature cells and they constitute the permanent tissue. So during the formation of the primary plant body, there are specific regions of the apical meristem which produce dermal tissues, ground tissues and vascular tissues. So what is the dermal tissues? Derma means a covering, right? So apart from forming just the or helping in just the elongation of the root or the shoot, apical meristems also help in the formation of specific parts of the plant body, such as the specific regions. I would like to call it as the regions that are other than the parts. So specific regions called as the dermal tissues, ground tissues and the vascular tissues. So dermal tissue, derma means skin. So it is the covering. So it helps in the formation of the epidermis, it helps in the formation of the cuticle, which is nothing but a waxy coating that is present in the epidermis, and also it helps in the formation of the root hair that is derived from the epidermis. So few of the cells of the root hair. So all this you will study in the coming sessions of this particular chapter. Next, it will also help in the formation of the ground tissues. So ground tissues are nothing but those tissues that are present in the cortex, be it the parenchyma, the collenchyma, the chlorenchyma or the sclerenchyma. And also it helps in the formation of the vascular tissues, that is the xylem and the phloem. So for all these, apart from just performing the function of elongation of the root and the shoot, they also are development of the axillary bud in the shoot and the increase in the length of the root. They also help in formation of the primary plant body, wherein they help in the formation of certain regions of the cells in the plant body. So this is about the apical meristem. So when talking about the primary meristems, I hope you have understood wherein I told you those cells which have lost their ability to divide and they'll stop completely dividing because the older cells would have been completely mature. So such cells are called as the permanent tissues. So I hope you understood this session well. So in today's session, we had studied about the important tissue in a plant which is actively dividing, called as the meristematic tissue. So in the meristematic tissue, it is again divided into the primary meristems and the secondary meristems. So the primary meristems are the first formed. So those tissues that come under the primary meristem are the shoot apical meristem, the root apical meristem and the intercalary meristem. Then we went into the secondary meristem, under which we studied about the lateral meristem. So again, after the formation of the primary and the secondary meristem, older cells, it reaches a stage wherein it will no longer divide or it will stop the process of division. So such mature cells are called as the permanent tissues. So I hope you understood this session well. In the coming session, we shall discuss about other tissues in a plant body as well. So we shall meet in the coming session. Thank you.